On today's show, we've got hot takes and we've got an ECT reunion. That's right, the boys are back on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be sure to leave a 5-star review, write some comments as well. Check us out on YouTube, search Locked On Cavs, like this video, click the subscribe button, hit that notification bell as well. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Hi again, everybody. I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers at places such as 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way, including a stop with these two as Matt Fontana of BIGPLAY Sports and ESPN Radio and Nick Paulus of ESPN Cleveland are with me today. If you don't know, the three of us used to do a daily radio show together every day on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Obviously, we've gone our separate ways, but we're still the best of friends. So I'm super excited to get to talk with these two tonight. What I asked of them, and this is going to be a two-part episode. We are recording this on Monday night. So part one going to be Tuesday, part two going to be Wednesday. I asked each of them to come with the hottest take that they have about the Cavs, about this offseason, or whatever it is. So the first episode, we're going to go with Nick's hot take. Nick, so happy to have you on Locked On Cavs today. Deliver the take for us.
Hey, Danny, Matt, just glad to be in the same computer space as you guys right now. So I've been thinking about this one for a little bit because the offseason for the Cavs, obviously everything that has been going on with them, they haven't done much. Let's be honest. They've re-signed a couple of their players. Extensions. You've hired Kenny Atkinson. You let go JB Bickerstaff. I love the moves. I do. But you haven't added anything. Guys, this Cavaliers team is a play-in team.
Wow. Matt, your thoughts.
I mean, we saw, it's funny because like when we go back to the last couple of seasons, right, and just the progression that this team has been on, where they have actually been following the script of like an NBA rebuild. They're probably a little ahead of schedule, and that was mostly thanks to Donovan Mitchell. But the play-in, they did that, right? They did that 2 years ago. Now, to Nick's point, and maybe you were going to get there, Nick, is it's a borderline about what the Cavs maybe haven't done and maybe more about what other teams have done, right? About the Knicks getting that much better, the fact that 76ers seem to be better. I mean, your thoughts on Paul George, all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of, you feel stagnant, right? Where everybody else is making moves or everybody else is making moves to be able to improve their team, and the Cavs couldn't do anything. They didn't do anything. Now, their biggest thing was getting Donovan Mitchell back. So I wonder, Nick, are you saying more it's like you feel like this Cavs team is bad enough to be in play, or it's like they're stuck in the mud and everybody else is passing them up now?
I view this as the East has gotten so much better, and the Cavaliers have just been stagnant. And if you're I'm looking at the NBA standings, obviously things are going to change. But you have the ball. Indiana they made it to a conference finals. They're a fine team, but possibly the Cavs might be better. But the 76ers got better. I think that the Miami Heat, for whatever reason, they always are in the vicinity of that 6-7 range. For whatever reason, and I know Donovan Mitchell is a stud. I know Darius Garland. I believe he's going to be on this team for a majority of the season, if not a little bit longer. Matt, I guess we'll get to your take here in a little bit. But
we'll find out what mine is coming out in a little bit.
I guess we'll find out.
Stay tuned for part two, I guess.
Right. But the way that I look at this team is that, again, it's just stagnant. And they've won, 99 games over the last 2 years, which, nice, good. But you have to get better somewhere. We need to add more bodies here. And for whatever reason, they didn't, and I'm a little concerned.
So I totally get the concern, and I do think it's a fair thing to say that they didn't get better because they've not added anything. And maybe you're underrating the addition of Kenny Atkinson a little bit, because I do think that things are going to look different offensively in a good way for the Cavs. Just because I think that he's got such a different style than JB Bickerstaff did on that end of the floor. Now, the counterpoint there is they might take a step back defensively. But the way I would look at it is I'm not sure that any of the teams that were below the Cavs, other than Philly, like if you look through the standings last year, so it was who? Boston, the Knicks finished second, right? I think they're still in that number 2 spot. The Bucks finished third. I'm not crazy about Milwaukee, but I think they have a pretty high regular season floor just because they've got the best or the second best player in the Eastern Conference in Giannis, right? And then you've got the Cavs at 4, Orlando, Indiana, Miami, that whole group of teams you listed. I don't know that any of those teams that I look at and say, yes, some of them did get better, but I don't know that they got better to the point where they're past the Cavs. Because the other thing that I do think you have to think about when talking about how this team is built for the regular season, last year in the regular season, almost everything that could go wrong did go wrong for them. Like their starting lineup, and say what you want about it, like maybe you don't think that that group works together all that well, they only played 28 games ago. So there was a lot of time missed injury-wise, and it wasn't just one guy. It was spread out amongst really 3 guys, because Jarrett Allen missed the first 5 games of the year or whatever, and then played the rest of the regular season games. But Evan Mobley missed a bunch of time. Darius Garland missed a bunch of time. Donovan Mitchell missed a bunch of time. So for those 3 guys to miss as much time as they did and still win 48 games, I take as a good thing. I think it's a very different discussion from playoff success, certainly. But I find it tough to believe that if Donovan Mitchell is healthy for the majority of the season, that this team's not going to win 48 or more games. And if they're at 48 wins, I don't know how they're in the play-in.
I also think about the East, like when you talk about every year, like if I sat here and I told you guys right now, would it be crazy for in any order of the top 4 in the East being Boston, the Knicks, the 76ers, and the Bucks, right? Whatever order you want to jumble them up. I'm not a big believer in the Pacers. I think the Magic are coming, but they're not there quite. So of those 4, what has history told us over and over again? One of those 4 teams will be irrelevant by the time the playoffs start, right? Every year, it's the team that mostly injuries hit them and they're not the same. Or again, just me laying out those 4 teams, what they even have to deal with in the regular season. So you always take one of those teams out. Like again, they might finish higher than the Cavs in the East, but again, last year it was Milwaukee, years before, it's just all these teams like Boston that have the 1 seed or they're this top seed and they never actually show up for the playoffs. So I think, to Nick's point about the play-in tournament thing, there are teams that are going to pass the Cavs. But I also know there's going to be teams that are going to be fading by the time the playoffs come back around. And I'm kind of, Danny, I get where you're coming from too, because I just think teams got better, but there's also going to be a team that takes a step back. There's going to be one of those teams. I don't think it's going to be Boston. The Knicks, I think, have a lot of blow-up potential for this year. Like, I don't think it'll have, but it's like one of those teams I could see really, really struggling this year.
I think it could be the Cavs. And it's one of those. Yeah. It's one of those. I mean, we're all looking around this room saying like, oh, yeah, no, it'll definitely be X, it'll be Y, it'll be Z. It could be us, like that's also a very legitimate thing, because as much as I think Kenny Atkinson is going to do I think he'll do a well job. Yeah. His mantra is like developing talent. And I mean, there's a lot of talent on this team to be developed and to, become the next level. I know we just paid Evan Mobley. That is something that, I mean, to his core, he kept saying at the press conference, I was there with Danny, he kept saying Evan Mobley is going to have the opportunity. He's going to be dribbling the ball down the court. Like he's going to have so many different opportunities. And I guess I just need to see that development before I trust what he's doing. And again, Kenny sounds like he has a plan, and that's great. But I need to see it before I start saying anything else. And I've seen a lot of teams so far add to the depth in the East. And it feels like every other team is passing the Cavs. And that's where I'm at.
So I think for this to happen, for your spicy take of the summer to come true, I think that some things would obviously have to go wrong for the Cavs. If things go well for the Cavs, I don't think that they're in that conversation. But if things go poorly for the Cavs, if certain things happen that don't go their way, they could end up in that picture. What are those things? That's what we're going to talk about next on today's Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by Game Time. Game Time, of course, is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, and that makes getting tickets to MLB games faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. Maybe you want to go check out the Cleveland Guardians this weekend. They've got a Hall of Fame induction, CC Sabathia, going into the Team Hall of Fame. Of course, they just made a trade for Lane Thomas on Monday night. Who knows if they'll make another deal before the trade deadline comes and goes, but this is a team certainly worth getting excited about, worth going to check out at Progressive Field. And if you want to get in the gates, Game Time is the way to go. They've got killer last minute deals. They show you the all-in price, a really important thing. You're not going to be bombarded with taxes and fees at the last minute. The price you see is the price you pay. Plus, they show you exactly what your seat is going to look like. They show you exactly when you're sitting in your seat, what does the field look like? What does the court look like? The stage, if you're going to a concert. Game Time will show you that right in the app. And of course, they've got the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the Game Time app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, that's LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So for the Cavs to end up in the play-in, I think that they would probably have to finish around 44 wins. I think if they get to 45, they're going to be in the 6th seed. That would probably be the magic number. That also was the number when they finished in 8th and were in the playoff, or in the play-in back in, that was the spring of 2022 when they lost to the Brooklyn Nets and then lost to the Atlanta Hawks and went home and got the number 14 pick in the draft. So that's where I think they would have to be. And then you look at the recent history, they won 51 games, Donovan Mitchell's first year here. They won 48 games this past season, finished 4th both years. So they would have to take a step back in terms of wins. I don't think that comes just because some teams in the East got better. I don't think you would just subtract 4 wins. So Nick, I ask you, with this being your take, what has to go wrong with the Cavs to lose 4 or 5 wins and find themselves in 7th place?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. They've lost 3 games the year before, and the difference between the 4th seed and the 7th seed for the Cavs this year was 1 game. 47 was a top 6 team. That was the 76ers with 47 wins. So I understand that, maybe 44 games is where it might be. Who knows? I also think that this is a team that kind of, and obviously you need to have more playoff success. We need to see more from this team. But I feel like this is one of those regular season teams that, might not give it their all now because they know what they have to do. In the playoffs, they feel like maybe we can, as long as everyone's healthy going into the playoffs, you're good. So maybe you can cost a game or, here or there. And I'm not saying that they're going to tank any games or anything like that, but I kind of look at this team saying, okay, what was the biggest issue last year with this team? It was the health. It was health, injuries, a lot of it going into the playoffs. Donovan had missed 10 games towards the end of the regular season. And it's because he was banged up. And we were saying 2 weeks before the playoffs started, is Donovan even going to be healthy enough to play? And he was superb and fantastic in the playoffs, but he ended up getting injured. Jared Allen got injured. We saw Darius Garland and Evan Mobley miss time. I think that they're going to take a much more, laxed approach towards the end of the year, saying, "Hey, let's rest our guys." Why can't I think of the
load management?
Load management. Thank you. I knew someone was going to get it. So, but load management. I do see them taking their time getting into the playoffs, because once you're in the playoffs, if Donovan Mitchell's on your team, I feel really good about my chances. I do. So just because they're a play-in team doesn't mean that I don't think that they can make a little bit of a run. But again, I need to see more, and the injury concern really bothered me. And again, they were only one game out from that 7th seed. So that's where it is.
I will say the one thing about only being one game out, it was that happened with them punting on the last day of the regular season. Like that
against
was
Charlotte, right?
Yeah,
against Charlotte, a game that if they needed, like that's an easy win.
Sure.
And then the other aspect of that, they also did have the tiebreaker. So in reality, you could make the case that was, and I know the math says it's 1, but you could make the case that was a 3-game thing too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fair. And that's a fair point. But I also, again, I look at this team and think the injuries last year were a huge concern. So going into this, it wouldn't surprise me if even Kenny Atkinson said, hey guys, let's make sure that we're loaded up for the playoffs. And a couple weeks before the end of the season, if they're at a 41-42 games, they say, you know what? We have 6 games left. If we go 500, I feel good about our chances. And going 45 and 37, or whatever it might be, then it's not the end of the world. But knowing that you're healthy going into the playoffs means more to me.
Matt, what do you think has to go wrong?
I was going to say, I'll give you one, Nick, that's not injury related. They can't get this figured out. And I'm talking about the lineups. And it's like, could you imagine that Kenny Atkinson comes in? He's got Darius Garland here. He's got Jared Allen here. They didn't make the moves. Donovan Mitchell didn't want them traded. They're going to run this back. Great. What if they come stumbling out of the gates? Because Atkinson can't find the right way to get these guys to work together. What if the 3-point shooting, and it's not what you expected out of Strus and George Niang, who's still going to have to play important minutes for you, is the worst version of George Niang that we saw last year? Like, I see that. No, you can't have that. No,
please God,
no, please God, no. But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's it, with the changes that are going to have to happen with Atkinson, I'm with you guys. Like, I'm excited Kenny Atkinson's here. And my biggest thing is Evan Mobley, man. Kenny Atkinson, Evan Mobley, get that figured out. But if it takes too long to get everything else fixed or to get everything else up to speed, you stumble out of the gates and then you're just chasing the rest of the season. Then if they do make a trade at the trade deadline, you throw that wrench in. Like, I'm not going to say like the Doc Rivers level type thing, but you saw like the Bucks were not good. And when they make a change mid-season, they never were able to pick it back up. I know it's the off season. I know they have plenty of time to get things on the right page, but it's also Kenny Atkinson is basically forced to play this roster that he has. And in kind of my opinion, I don't think this roster works. I don't think the 4 that they have work. So he's going to have to figure out the right ways to do it. That's going to take time. And that might take losses. And that might have to take Kenny Atkinson changing lineups and things like that. That doesn't always go smoothly. On top of you, right, Nick, like that's a number 1 for me too. All 4 of the core 4 last year were hurt at some point, missed weeks of the season. Nobody's winning, with that. Nobody's going to be able to win that stretch. Again, the stretch that they went on when it was first Mobley and Garland was really impressive. I don't know if they can do that again.
But the thing with that stretch that doesn't get brought up, I don't think often enough, is that stretch started with Mobley and Garland both out, but they also then came back and went like 9-1 in their first 10 games back. Like so that gets overblown as, they were 18-1 when those two were injured. No, they were really good without them, but they were like 8-1, which is it's a considerable difference. For me, I think for them to be in that spot, it has to be injuries, because if you look at what's happened in the regular season, and I don't think that as currently constructed, this is a team that we should expect to go on a conference finals or NBA finals run. I think that they've got issues as a playoff team. But I think as constructed, they've shown they can win a lot of regular season games. They can be a team that is difficult to prepare for in the regular season. So I think if they are going to be in the play-in, it's probably going to be injuries. And I think even more specific than that, it would have to be an injury to Donovan Mitchell, because I think that he is someone that he is such a floor raiser for this organization, to where if you even go back and look at what he did in Utah, how good some of those teams were, and granted, they ran into a similar problem as the Cavs where they had some postseason failures. They couldn't get out of the second round either, but they were always a really good regular season team. I think Donovan brings that here too. So that's why I think, if they're going to be a play-in team, they would probably have to deal with an injury to Donovan Mitchell for an extended period of time, longer than last year. And I mean, he missed, I believe he played in 55 games last year, 57 games last year. So he missed almost, close to 30 games. I think if you start looking at he misses half the season, then okay, that's when I think you look at this as probably a play-in team. The one other thing that I don't know who's better than the Cavs, I kind of want to make a case against some of the teams below them that would have to jump them to move up and push the Cavs down into the play-in. That's what we're going to do next on today's Locked On Cavs. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Again, you can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, as well as you can check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs. So if you go through and look at the standings for last year, obviously the Cavs finished in fourth, and I think there's a group of teams that are worth talking about here. The Cavs finished in fourth. The Orlando Magic were in fifth. Indiana Pacers were in sixth. Philadelphia was in seventh. I believe Miami was in eighth. And that's really the group that's worth talking about, because you get down further than that. You get into Atlanta, you get into Chicago, who I don't think is going to be very good. Brooklyn, who wants to lose every game they play. Toronto, somebody has to finish 10th in the Eastern Conference. So of that group, I don't know that there are enough teams that I'm confident in being better than the Cavs, even with some injuries and even with this team not clicking right away under a new coach. And Indiana is the team that I look at in particular that I just don't buy. They made an Eastern Conference Finals run last year, but remember a few years back when Philadelphia imploded in the playoffs. Ben Simmons was scared to shoot a layup. The Hawks went to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they haven't been heard from since. I think that there's some 2021 Atlanta Hawks potential with the Pacers. So that's a team that I'm not buying. But Matt, and I'll start with you on this. Who are you buying as a team that below them? And I want to take Philadelphia out of this because they added Paul George. Sure. I think that's a cop-out. And I don't want a cop-out from you guys. So other than Philly, who are you buying that's below the Cavs that could push them down?
We did a show for 3 years, and now you're not going to let me cop out on things. All right, I guess.
Yeah, I got too much. I got too many cop outs from you.
You have too many experience. I know you have.
I'm putting my foot down.
I've had enough. This is your show. This is your podcast.
Exactly. You could cop out on your own show. You can't cop out on my show.
2 years, I get away with it. Now he's.
If you want to hear Matt Fontana cop out, go listen to him on Big Play every day, the Matt Fontana show. But if you're on Locked On Cavs, he's not copping out.
Or go back.
You guys can cop out on Cleveland Browns Daily whenever I crack a mic.
There you go. I love it. So I agree with you. You got to take Philly out of it. And I'm with you on the Pacers, by the way. Tyrese Halliburton had just such a weird season where he was, almost the MVP of the play-in tournament the in-season tournament. And then every month, every major statistical category for him went down. And then all of a sudden, even throughout the playoffs, he wasn't playing good. And then he just miraculously shows up a few times in the conference finals. So I'm not buying the Pacers either. Team that I am buying is Orlando. And I think it's not just because we saw them play the Cavs, but they have a star guy like Paolo Banchero. And I think when you look at Banchero, he's the body type that you want in today's NBA. He's a guy that you look at and you say, okay, that's what we can build around. Am I a big believer in the Wagner twins? Not necessarily, no. But I think even just the rumors of this, if they were actually able to get Klay Thompson, and I don't know how legitimate those rumors were, but the fact that they were kind of pursuing him, I do see Orlando as a team that not even just this year, but I think for the next couple of years, they're on a rise. Do I ever think they'll be like a 1 or 2 seed? Probably not. But I think they're going to be a really solid 4 or 5 seed in the East. So this could be the year that I see the Orlando Magic jumping up over the Cavs.
So I think they could maybe get up pretty high in the East one day, but I totally think that is just entirely dependent on Paolo Banchero hitting his ceiling. I agree. He has Carmelo Anthony type Hall of Fame potential. I see a lot of Carmelo in him. So if he hits that, and obviously, 2 years in, you don't really know. I was very impressed with him in the playoffs. But if he hits that, then yeah, I think you're on the right path there. Nick, what do you think?
Well, real quick on that, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nick, but I would say too, they also have a couple years to prove to him because he'll get out of there in 2 years, right? Like we see it how many times with star players where if you can't even at least show them that you can bring free agents in because they know nobody can do it by themselves. So if Paolo Banchero goes out and has another great year this year and really does establish himself as a young star in this league, Orlando's got maybe 1 or 2 more years to prove we can get some people here to help you because if not, he's going to get out of there. And they could be right back to square one.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I do believe that it is Orlando is the, I don't want to say like the silent killer down there because they're really good. They're a good team. They're a very, very solid defensive team. We saw that. I know that, they hadn't won a home game in a decade, until we faced them down in Orlando, but they're a good team. And for whatever reason, they play us extremely tough. I think Paolo Banchero is the truth. I think that you are going to see him take a jump. Now, whether he's averaging 30 points and, 11 boards or something, and like the guy looks like the real deal to me in his second year. So you figure that third season, we typically see a jump in potential. And that's something that we saw it. I mean, we saw it in the playoffs this year. So whether or not as currently constructed, I agree with you, Matt. I think that Orlando looks at this and says, we need to start making some runs with Paolo. So whether or not they're currently constructed to beat the Cavs right now, the trade deadline, we know we're going to see a bunch of teams make moves. And I could totally see Orlando trying to big time somebody and get a major piece for Orlando going forward.
I do think that's the answer. I was really impressed with them in the playoffs. I'm super impressed with Paolo Banchero. I think that, the addition of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is going to be a good one for the Magic. Matt, I'm with you. I'm not crazy about Franz Wagner. Like I still can't believe kind of that they gave him a max contract extension. Mo Wagner just falls down all the time. But I do think that is a team. They're going to go as far as Paolo Banchero can take them. And I think Paolo Banchero could probably take them quite a ways. I think he's really, really good. So, Nick, I think that is while I disagree with it, that's a spicy take to start us off. Tomorrow's show, Matt Fontana's spiciest take of the offseason or about the Cavs. We're going to get to that. Make sure you check out Matt every day on the Matt Fontana Show on Big Play. Make sure you check out everything Nick does at ESPN Cleveland. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We will be back tomorrow. These two, Matt's hottest take about the Cavs. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned for that on Locked On Cavs.